Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Daily Ipswich here on the Global Sports Podcast Network. We hope you all had a great weekend. Town did not play this weekend as it was FA Cup action, but we are here today to preview tonight's clash Ipswich Town away at Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup. To do me, I'm glad to say I'm once again joined by Mr. Richard Popple. Hi, Richard. How was your weekend as well, mate?
It's very good, yeah. It's been sunny, so I've actually it's been quite nice and been out in the countryside. It's been good.
Yeah, the spring is starting to sprung.
It is,
if that's the correct word.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Yeah, cold nights are starting to drift away now, which is really good. Obviously, tonight is a big game for Town, not Premier League action, which some fans may be happy about, but it is still very much a big game. Now we are very much in the business end of the FA Cup. And we haven't really been at this stage, I think, as you and Rob touched upon, for 17 years, I believe.
It's a long time, yeah. I can't remember the date, but the number of years off the top of my head, but it was something like that, yeah. Long old time.
Yeah, long old time, exactly. So really, these chances are few and far between, no matter how big your club is, really. And we really hope we can take it tonight. As I said, though, we are away at the City Ground, which has been a very difficult place to go to for any side this season. We obviously went there, I think it was like October time, earlier in the season at least, before Forest maintained this run. They are where they are now, but it was just people expect them to drift further down, but they've managed to maintain it, which is fantastic for a club like that who used to be there every single season and starts to drift away. But yeah, a 1-0 loss for us there in the season, but it was a penalty, not really a very interesting affair. I remember looking back on that game earlier in the season. It was kind of a bit of a drab one, wasn't it? And we kind of moved on to the next one, which I think was Crystal Palace, and that didn't go very well for us. But are you looking forward to the game, Richard? It's like I said, it's not a league game, so we can be a bit more optimistic. Form kind of goes out the window in the cup, you could argue.
Yeah, I think it does, doesn't it? I mean, we're on telly. It's on telly, right?
Yep. ITV in the UK. I don't know where else.
ITV in the UK. Fantastic. Yeah, so live TV, which will be good fun, not behind the old paywall. So, yeah, it'd be a nice chance to kind of I think you're right, a bit of a distraction from the league. The league's obviously been a bit disastrous, realistically, since the turn of the year. So, obviously, as we mentioned, we're on a little bit of a cup run, and it'd be amazing to get to the next round, even though obviously the draw has just come out and we haven't been given the easiest one, but more on that later. But yeah, I am looking forward to it. I think they've just got to go for it, really. I mean, it doesn't matter if we lose the game, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, if you win it, you're one game away from Wembley. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to kind of have a nice day out, really. But yes, tough challenge to go to the third place side in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my biggest question heading into tonight's game, I'm not really going to do like a predicted lineup kind of thing, but we saw against Coventry and against Bristol, obviously this is a much better quality of opposition than anything we played in the Cup so far this season. But do you expect us to have almost that Cup team again to an extent, or do you expect to see the Premier League 11, or will the likes of maybe Connor Townsend and George Hurst get a start in this game, do you think?
I reckon Hurst will get a start. Connor Townsend, yeah, potentially. Actually, I think maybe those two actually probably would come in. I can't see really where else they would rotate unless you kind of take out the central defenders, maybe, which I wouldn't be opposed to anyway, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, we might see one or two changes there. But I mean, obviously, midfield we're light on options. He never plays Taylor in a 2, so I doubt he's going to come into the starting lineup. So I think it will be 2 of Kayuste, Morsey, and Calvin Phillips as per usual. The 3 behind is kind of anyone's guess, but I reckon Schmodix will probably come back in. I can see that maybe Broadhead. I don't think Jack Clark was fantastic really in the last couple of games, really. So potentially he comes out the side. But yeah, I think Hurst will definitely be out front, which will be nice to see, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You touched on maybe not wanting to see the centre backs there out of all the sort of rotations that could possibly come about tonight. I've seen a lot of discourse in the past.
I know, there's been a lot
about, especially Cameron Burgess making his comeback, because I think he had that brief sort of month stint when Greaves was out for a decent amount of time, and really we waxed lyrical about him, and then he was fantastic on the pitch, wasn't he? Do you see that, especially for a player like him, he could find his way into the team in this game, potentially after that as well?
I think so. I mean, I've seen some of that discourse as well, and obviously football a fan's kind of response to stuff. It's been quite maintained for a period of time. It's been very supportive behind the team, and it's been very, I don't know, measured, I suppose is the word. But some of those more kind of like emotional responses have started to creep in, and that's become a bit more of the kind of the overall kind of like picture online, it feels like. So yeah, there's been a bit of kind of finger pointing. There's been a not good enough kind of chucked at a few players and not very good signings and all that kind of stuff, which obviously I'm sure we will get to at the end of the season when we start thinking about maybe reviews and looking back of how players have done and stuff. But I think we kind of have to remember that all of them were basically stepping up a level to come in here, whether they were at the club before or were bought in. It was only Calvin Phillips, right, and obviously Enciso in January that had, and Ben Godfrey, I suppose, that had that kind of like previous Premier League experience. So they were all taking a leap up, and some have done that better than others, let's be honest. So I think in the defence, because we've been so porous recently and we've looked terrible in some games realistically, and you guys obviously covered the Man United game during the week. I wasn't around during the week, but my 2 pence worth of that is like, conceding 3 goals from set pieces all of a sudden in one game is just kind of, well, naive at best, right? So and the third one, we looked absolutely clueless, really. We were just standing around and Maguire had a free header and it completely unchallenged, no one was moving, etc. So something's gone wrong back there. The breakdown in communication, confidence, individual errors, whatever it might be. But I think you will see changes there, whether it's because of giving them a game because of the FA Cup or the fact that actually those players haven't been performing particularly well. And, it's the whole team defends, etc. But there are individuals at the back, I think, that have not been in the best of form recently or covering themselves in that much glory.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's hard to argue like with rotations, isn't it? Because you do want to see people get their chance, but then with the rotation, there is aspects of people getting out of favour and not getting that right 11, which we've struggled, I think, especially defensively in the middle, to have that sort of consistency all season. Injuries haven't really helped there as well. How are you feeling going into the game tonight? Are you confident? Like I said, form can kind of go out the window in a cup. Plymouth obviously didn't get the result at the Etihad, but they took the lead, and there's some crazy results happening. I guess Preston were non-Premier League side who are through, so it is, I know, albeit they did play a championship opposition, but there's chances to have a bit of an upset. And where we are on the table, despite being all Premier League affair, it is a difficult game for us on paper, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a free shot. I mean, I think we've got a very good chance of pulling off a result, but purely because it's a one-off game. So it's like, what have we got to lose, really? I mean, we could go there tonight and get absolutely battered. Like, it could be an easy win for Forest because they are the better team this season. So, I think if they play well, ultimately we're going to struggle to win the game. But I don't see why we can't give it a go. And it doesn't, as I say, it doesn't really matter if we lose the game. So it's just an opportunity for them to maybe express themselves a little bit and not feel the pressure of the kind of weight of what the league has become, unfortunately, which it doesn't look like we've dealt with so well in recent weeks, that kind of pressure. So I think there's a reasonable opportunity we can win the game for sure. And like we've all discussed all season, we've been better away than we have at home. I think we've scored more goals away than we have at home. So there's no reason why we can't carry a bit of a threat. And particularly as the first game in the league between the sides was pretty tight, was pretty close.
Yeah, very much so. Like, before we go to the first break, I'm not going to ask for a score prediction, but I can't remember the last time ever Town had one of these. But if it goes to penalties, because there was a couple of shootouts across the weekend, I think United's game had one, and Bournemouth and Wolves as well. Who would be your 5?
That's a great question.
If we were to have that, because obviously Delap's he's been our take all season, smacked in. I think every time Fulham and Chelsea would come to mind. I can't think of other penalties he's had, but he'd obviously be on that. Can you think of 4 others who could potentially step up to take one?
Didn't George Hurst take a penalty last year?
Yeah, yes, I think so. Yeah.
So I think Hurst, if he's on the pitch as well, Delap obviously, Broadhead definitely, because he was a penalty taker for sure last year in the Championship and should be playing at the moment anyway. But that's my cross to bear. That'd be 3. Who would you go for?
I think maybe leave Davis if he's on. I think he's always quite reliable.
I think Davis needs a night off. But if he's on the pitch, I think just for him, just a bit of a night off, just to get his legs
maybe
back.
Maybe like Tuesday or Morsey, just to smack it in.
Well, Tuesday won't be on the pitch, will he, if it's a penalty shootout?
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing. He gets like randos who you never really expect to take a penalty. You saw there's a few of lads for Fulham on Sunday's game when they stepped up and just smacked in and haven't scored all season. So there's players like that who could do it, isn't there?
Yeah, maybe Big Cam just pumps one in the top corner.
Yeah. Would you like penalties? Like I sometimes don't mind it because I think it's a bit. I mean, especially
quite enjoy it.
I know obviously it's a neutral perspective game, but it is a bit more not enjoyable, but like it's a fun way to win it. But obviously it's heartbreaking but all that sort of stuff. But I haven't seen. I was about to say I haven't seen Town a penalty shot for ages, but we had one early in the season of flipping Wimbledon, and that didn't go very well.
Didn't go very well at all. No.
Yeah, none of those takers, please. If that was a cup team, I guess, wasn't it? But
it was, yeah. Well, I mean, Forest had a penalty shootout in the last round, didn't they? Exeter, they got through on penalties. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah,
it was.
Well,
yeah,
there you go.
So
against a team much lower than them.
They've got a bit of previous, but yeah, no, I quite enjoy penalty shootout. They're always quite dramatic.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it for our sort of review of the game. We won't do our score predictions because it's difficult with a cup game, and I'm just a bit afraid to do it, to be honest. But hopefully, Town can find their way to get a victory and move on to the quarterfinals, which is against Brighton. But we'll sort of give our little take on the quarterfinal draw later in the show. But we'll take our first break now and look back at the weekend's FA Cup games.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
And we are back here on the Daily Ipswich, looking back at this weekend's FA Cup action and some big results, I think. Obviously, we saw a lot of usual suspects go through, all teams we expected to win, but some entertaining games nonetheless. I'll sort of go through the games over the weekend. We'll start with Friday's one, Richard, which was Aston Villa against Cardiff. I think we very much expected Villa to get the result, which they did 2-0. It was very much Cardiff kind of sit back and hope for just defending for their lives and hope for a counter-attack. But then the quality of Villa kind of shone through with a double from Marco Asensio. I mean, he's hitting the ground running, isn't he? Like, I know obviously he's a proven player, but coming to the League 29, he's been in Spain and a bit of, I think, Paris briefly as well. You know, there can be that sort of stereotype of players from those leagues who come into the Premier League and can't necessarily cut it, but he looks right at home already, doesn't he?
He does. It shows you what a good manager can do, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Emery does seem to get players like that just straight away to kind of like contribute. He's got the Midas touch. Yeah, he's brilliant. That was his second double of the week, wasn't it? He's got 4 goals in 2 games. I mean, he's not even a goal scorer. So I think the way that Villa play with this kind of like fairly cavalier front line, you know, winning the ball high up the pitch and all that kind of stuff, and then attacking with a lot of pace and a lot of directness, like, has really suited him. He's kind of bought into that, and as you say, got quite a pedigree as a player anyway. So yeah, he's hit the ground running, and good for them. They've been odd this year, haven't they, Villa? They've looked absolute $1 million at times, a bit like Spurs, really. They look incredible at times, and then obviously they've been a bit better than Spurs, but then at other times they kind of chuck games away a little bit and look a bit flaky at the back and stuff. But yeah, going forward, they are a handful for anyone. And obviously, I think, you know, that was always going to be a bit of a bridge too far for Cardiff, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. Moving on to, I think, for me, one of the sort of standout games, I think it's because of living a bit more further up north, but was an all-Lancashire affair of Preston against Burnley. Won't go too much into that, but we saw Preston get 3-0 win. So like I said at the top of the show, it's nice to see it and not Premier League side go through there as well, and potentially a chance for another cup set, as Rob coined in our previous FA Cup episode, to come through. I think one of the craziest moments of the weekend, I won't go really too much into the game, but it was Palace against Millwall, which some were saying is a derby of sorts. You live around the London area, Richard, but are you a bit knowledgeable on that? Is that a derby, Palace-Millwall?
Palace-Millwall? Well, it's not really the area of London I live in, but it's a derby, isn't it? I mean, people say that Crystal Palace, well, not people, I'll hold my hands up, the fans of these clubs say that they're a rivalry, Palace and Brighton. And that's, you know, that's a long way apart, but obviously they've got that rivalry going on. So yeah, but I think Palace and Millwall is a bit of a rivalry too. Yeah, fairly easy victory for Palace, but obviously that's not what you're talking about, I guess. No.
Yeah, well, that crazy. I think it's the 8th minute from Millwall's goalkeeper Liam Roberts to start the game with a immediate red. Well, actually went to VAR. I think it was Michael Oliver who was refereeing that game, and he didn't get into red, which I guess it was just as it was kind of in the shadow and the sun of the pitch. Maybe his vision was kind of obscured, but booted Jean-Philippe Mateta right in the noggin there, and
it was awful.
Yeah, he needed 25 stitches after the game. Mateta as well. Like, it's brutal. I
think it's one of the worst challenges I think I've ever seen on a football pitch. It is really, really awful because I know he gets the ball like fractionally before he clatters into him, but he follows through. Because he's kicking the ball, he's flicking the ball away, so his boot is following through and absolutely clatters Mateta. And as you say, like 25 stitches. If that's on the front of his face, you're maybe thinking he loses an eyesight or something. Like, it genuinely was that bad. It was a really, really bad. I know he didn't mean to do it, obviously, but it was quite shocking to see.
Well, it kind of got me on to what I was going to ask you next. Was like, where does that rank in some of the craziest fouls you've ever seen? Like, for me, like the one that I always spring to mind is, and I think it was given a yellow, which is crazy. It wouldn't be given a yellow now, but it was the 2010 World Cup final. And it was Nigel de Jong, who's played for City, Spain v Netherlands, and he literally jumped in the air and karate kicked Xabi Alonso right in the chest, like studs right in the middle of his chest. It was only given a yellow. It was crazy. But that was one of the maddest ones I've ever seen. Obviously, you got Roy Keane on Haaland's dad years ago as well. That was a big one.
That was bad,
any ones that just, when you close your eyes, that was horrific.
I think City had one last year, I think, was it Doku who literally put the same kind of tackle as the De Jong one, literally a foot into the chest. It was a Liverpool player, I think it was, and he didn't get anything. It should have been a penalty and a red card, but there was nothing. Was it? Yeah, it was on McAllister. Maybe I can't remember.
Yes, it was on McAllister. Yeah, I'm just watching it now.
It was a horrendous tackle, and it's like it wasn't punished at all. Yes, that was bad. I mean, I'm thinking of a non-player, but the Cantona one back in the 90s, I mean, that's an absolute dream, isn't it?
Yeah, that one's just become like folklore, isn't it? I mean, that's what I was going to say. But
I think it's 30 years ago.
Yeah, with Palace as well. Was it a Palace?
It was at Selhurst Park. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Palace just attract chaos on and off the pitch, don't they? But that was one of the highlights from the weekend. Wasn't really a goal or anything like that, but it's just a crazy foul from Millwall's goalkeeper. Before we go to the next break, we'd look back on a game that kind of had an impact on Ipswich potentially. So it was Bournemouth v Wolves, which, I think Bournemouth are one of the, as you said, maybe the best team of the season or standout team of the season. If it wasn't for Forest, Iriola could be your manager of the season as well. But we saw it was 1-1 with an early goal from Bournemouth to take the lead. And then in the second half, where would they be about? And Mateus Cunha with an absolute thunderbolt to equalise around the 60th minute mark. Went to extra time. And then, as he has so many times this season, Cunha, who went down, just lost his head. I think threw a hand at Kirkes, their Bournemouth's brilliant left back, and was sent off. 3-game ban. Bournemouth did win 5-4 in penalties, but like I said, the big story from an Ipswich perspective is that Cunha now has a 3-game suspension. I mean, I'm not going to say this helps our chances, but it's not like, okay, we're going to stay up now. But I guess it could help. First question is, do you think that will help Town and hinder Wolves? I mean, he's got a 3-game ban. His first game back is against us.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that might hinder us then.
It's Everton, Southampton, and I'm not sure who the other side is that are playing. People are probably screaming at me now for who their third game is. But do you think that could help us? I mean, I've said it many times. They've been lost. Where would they be about in this season? Like, one of the big things going into the January window was if he leaves, that could help Town. But if he stays, maybe not. And you've seen he's bagged a lot of winners for them this season, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. I mean, he is their match winner for sure. But he's obviously, with that comes the old problem or two. That I think, is that his second red card of the season?
Yeah. It was against us.
The other one was against us, yeah. And he didn't get another ban on top of what he did at the end of the game, really, and he probably should have done. So, yeah, he's a bit of a hothead. Can that help us? I suppose so. I mean, I think the thing is with Wolves is it's not necessarily the goals that are going to keep him up. I mean, obviously they do need to win probably a couple more games, but their defence has got so much better since January. Like, they did bring in a couple of players to kind of help solidify them a little bit, and I think that's the thing that's made them much more difficult to beat. So they're staying in games for a lot longer. And then obviously Cunha and a couple of other players, they've got a little bit of quality around him, but Cunha obviously has been the standout. So yeah, maybe it will blunt their attack for a few weeks, but I think because their defence has improved so much, they may just, nick a result anyway, unfortunately. But yes, obviously we'd prefer him not to be around if possible.
Yeah. Do you think this, because he was linked, I think, most heavily with Arsenal in January. Do you think...
And Forest, I think Forest actually put in a bid for him, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah, now you say that. But do you think this sort of behaviour is maybe why nobody signed him, or just Wolves were asking for too much money? Like, it could be a factor, couldn't it?
Yeah, maybe. He's got that kind of like slight Richarlison about him, in the sense of like, when Richarlison was at Everton and even at Watford, even before that, he was actually really, really good, like quite effective and quite difficult for defenders. But he always had that kind of flare up or discipline problem in him. And I think at Spurs that's been exacerbated a little bit more, really, and his form's kind of like fallen away. But yeah, Cunha's obviously a brilliant player, but he does seem to have this problem and discipline issue, which I'm sure big clubs would, either try and knock out of him or steer clear of in the first place.
Yeah. I think as a Wolves fan, you're probably like, you like having someone with a bit of like sort of an edge to them in your team, but when it's your best player, you kind of wish it wasn't him because of the risk of him getting his bans like he's going to get. But it's double-edged sword as a Wolves fan, I can imagine. We're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll look back at the other games from the FA Cup this weekend, as well as giving instant reaction to the FA Cup quarter-final draw.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting...
Rob trying to get in twice there.
We know, Rob, we know.
Zencastr's great. So we're on the final part of today's show. Yeah, looking back at the games from the weekend. The other game on Saturday, we've got two more games to touch on Sunday, but there's one more game from Saturday. We don't have to go too much into this, but it was City v Plymouth. I think Plymouth were very much the darlings of this year's FA Cup, weren't they, in terms of a fantastic away result at Brentford. I think at that point, Brentford had the worst record out of any team in the English football pyramid, and Brentford had the best home record in the Premier League, and they still managed to get a win. Tell me how that happened. And then obviously then they went one better at home, beating Liverpool, their second loss of the season. And then, so I think they probably were relatively confident going into the Etihad, considering their two previous results. And they did take the lead. But then I guess City's quality just came through. But not a giant killing in that one, was there?
No, sadly not. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Plymouth fans would have been going absolutely bonkers when they took the lead. But yeah, City with a much changed side managed to get through. And unfortunately, they look like they are the favourites at this stage. Obviously, we'll get onto the draw, but they look to be the biggest fish still left in there for sure. I think we've talked about this before. They seem to get really good draws for the most part in the FA Cup, even though they do have a tricky one coming up. But yeah, they were a bit lucky, weren't they, against Leyton Orient to get through, given a bit of a scare in the last round. But after they got level with Plymouth, they kind of took care of business. But I do need to watch the Pie Face vlog of the match, because I've kind of become a bit obsessed with watching his vlogs. I don't know why.
To be honest, yeah.
Sorry,
I was waiting for you to mention him, to be honest, because you talked about the Liverpool result.
I talked about the Liverpool result because I'm just a bit. I just find him. One, I'm a bit like, why am I watching this, or why is anyone watching this? To be perfectly honest. And then two, it's just kind of enjoyable because you just see this guy with his group of mates having a good time, really, and they actually seem quite nice people, generally speaking.
Well, I think it's especially like this day and age. So many people who are in like that sort of sphere, that sort of media sort of world, and YouTube and all that sort of stuff. Like they predominantly support one of the stereotypical
big clubs. Yeah,
and that's kind of dry content, and people kind of accuse him of like being fair with a fan and not really going. But he's from that part. He's from that part of the country. You can tell from his accent, that's for sure.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Imagine those lads that go to the game are his mates from those days, and it's nice to see that's just raw passion. It's not like no one's going to bandwagon onto Plymouth. No offense to Plymouth Argyle fans, great rivals in League One a few seasons ago. But people who support those are Plymouth through and through. So it's kind of cool to see clubs like that get a bit more exposure, because he very much is the most famous Plymouth fan I can think of. I think Josh Widdicombe, the comedian.
Josh Widdicombe, he is, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's also that away day thing, isn't it? Of like,
Oh, yeah.
because I don't go to away games, unfortunately. Or I mean, I have a few of them, but like I've never had that kind of like get on a bus every single away game and kind of like with the same group of people and stuff. And you can see why that is kind of like ultimately what football is all about. Because, you know, this season, particularly for someone like Plymouth or us, you kind of get battered most times you go away, but it's that kind of like journey that you're going on together, which is the enjoyable part. So yeah, always nice to watch stuff like that. Maybe Ipswich needs somebody akin to that kind of personality to sort of drum up the club a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we very much got a famous fan. We don't talk about Adrian too
Who?
much.
Oh, yeah.
But he's not going to be vlogging away days, is he? Unless the music kind of dries up. But I don't see that happening.
No.
The last two games on Sunday, we'll go through the early kickoff, was Newcastle v Brighton. I think two teams, I think they were probably thinking we don't get drawn against each other, because I think they're outside of City probably were, and United, we'll get United in a sec, but probably were the two other favourites, I think, and one of them had to go. And I think St James's Park is a hard place to play, so I did kind of have my money on Newcastle to get the win. But Brighton got the result done. Really, again, I've praised him a lot this season, but Danny Welbeck again. I mean, I'm not going to call him an ageless wonder, because I think he's still like in his early 30s, I believe. But a fantastic winner from him, and he just keeps going. I think Rooney said later on in the day that he wished he was still at United as their striker.
Yeah, I bet Arsenal wish he's still at Arsenal as their striker. But he's been effective wherever he's gone, really, and he's actually probably the best he's ever been in his career, consistency-wise, even though he gets his fair share of injuries, obviously. But yeah, with Brighton, he's always a handful. He's kept Evan Ferguson basically out of the team for the last 18 months, pretty much, after he burst onto the scene. He's obviously now gone to West Ham anyway. But yeah, he's brilliant. He does seem to kind of have this kind of evergreen quality to his football, and he's become better, I think, as he's aged. He's become more efficient as he's aged, because he was never like a prolific striker. He just had kind of like great attributes and stuff, but seems to fit their system really, really well. I mean, Newcastle, like, you're right, St James's Park does seem to be a difficult place to go for the big teams. They always seem to get themselves up for really big games, and they're a handful for the top of the league sides. They always give City a good game there. Liverpool, the 3-3 game, I think, earlier in the season, beat Arsenal obviously in the cup and stuff. So the big games, they seem to get up for it, but they have lost a few recently. I think Bournemouth went there recently, Fulham went there recently in the league and both won.
Yeah.
Brighton now in the cup. So I think they're a funny team like that. And that's a bit of an Eddie Howe kind of trait, I think, as a manager. He is brilliant at kind of like tactically getting involved in those big games and getting the players up for it, but occasionally they drop the ball a little bit when they maybe shouldn't do, because that was kind of an amazing opportunity for them, really. Brighton are a good team, obviously, but like, you know, you would expect Newcastle at home to get that result. So that's probably the most surprising result, I would say, of the fifth round.
I mean, they've got a day at Wembley booked in a couple of weeks, haven't they, Newcastle? Yeah. So they could have potentially almost, obviously it's of course final next, but with that win, they could have gone to a semis with another Wembley trip as well. But I imagine Newcastle fans, I mean, obviously they want to finish as high as they can in the league, but I imagine they're one of the many sides who are desperate for silverware, especially in recent years of the takeover and how close they came, I think, in the EFL Cup a couple of seasons ago. Like,
what is it, 1969 or something? It's longer than Ipswich.
Around that. I know it's a long old time. It's
longer than Ipswich, Newcastle fans.
Newcastle's last trophy was 1955, last domestic trophy.
Jeez.
Which, in my head right now, I'm thinking of Back to the Future, and it's read 1955.
That's bonkers, isn't it? Ipswich since then have won a league title, an FA Cup. I mean, I know this is all before our time as well, but still, that is bonkers.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Like, especially like the heights they've reached in big moments they've had. I think they've come close so many times. You think when they were Keegan
and the players they've had.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? You would have thought eventually one trophy would have come through the door, but hasn't yet. Maybe it will in a couple of weeks, but obviously they're playing Liverpool in the cup final.
Well, I hope they do, to be honest. I'd quite like to see somebody else get their hands on a trophy or two.
Until Newcastle's takeover becomes like City's one in 10 years' time, and then we don't want to see them win anything. But for now, they're
fine. But for now, yeah.
Yeah. The final game on Sunday was, it didn't end in 90 minutes or in extra time. It ended on penalties, but in terms of the winners, I very much predicted this side to win the game, and that was Fulham, and they did. I think United at home this season, we saw it last week with us. Yes, we gave away some poor set pieces, but I'd say we were kind of equal in terms of most of the game. There were spells when they had a lot of possession, but predominantly it was kind of two sides equally going at it, which is not where United fans obviously want them to be. Rich, I know you're not the biggest of United fans, but Fulham got the job done again. Like, they've been great all season. it's crazy going to these games. I know obviously they're not where they used to be. I'm not comparing them to that at all, but we're in a world now where you watch a United home game, you kind of expect them to lose and be really poor, and they were in both factors. Fulham got the job done and on to the quarterfinals.
Yeah, they're terrible. They are terrible. I mean, I obviously didn't comment on the Ipswich game, but yeah, as you say, it was a pretty even game, and that is a damning kind of statement on Man United, because we weren't that great, and basically gave them the game with the set piece goals and stuff. But they're awful, and I think the results they do get kind of flatter them. To be honest, they obviously got through against, I think it was Arsenal in the third round on penalties. They were lucky in that game, really. I think Arsenal battered the door down. They just don't have any strikers. And then I agree with you. I think you look at this game on paper, and I thought Fulham would go there and win in 90 minutes, to be honest. So maybe they did quite well to get to penalties. But it's incredible how far they've fallen, really, and how big a job it is to build them back up. I mean, they will be back, I'm sure, at some point. They're too big a club not to be. And I'm sure in 5 years' time or whatever, they'll be back to something like they were before. But at the moment, it's just amazing to see how, because all big clubs go through this. They all have a dip. Liverpool came 7th a few years ago. People kind of forget that. They had a completely off year and stuff. And obviously City is sort of doing it now. But United's kind of decline is just bonkers, really. And I know they've picked up a couple of trophies here or there, but even those feel like they've papered over cracks a little bit, really. And in fairness, let's not just talk about Man United. Fulham are a really good team and have had a great season. So for them, it's a massive result. But as you say, one that they could probably have expected, given that they won there earlier in the year, and Man United are not very good. So yeah, good on Fulham for getting through.
Yeah, definitely. There's some players in Fulham's side which kind of likened it to the way you talked about Emery with Villa. I think some players with Fulham as well, the manager there, he's got just certain individuals, like Alex Iwobi is another one, is Arsenal.
Yeah.
He looks like a world beater now. He's doing fantastic stuff off the pitch for communities, which is really great to see. Calvin Bassett, I'm a big fan of his. He's an absolute monster, and he really great goal for Fulham. Really, really top player, and they've got some great players at Fulham. And we've got 2 points against them this season, and I think that's something to be quite proud of. And we've kind of gone toe-to-toe in both those games. But Fulham winning on penalties and through to the quarterfinals. Well, before we go, quarterfinal draw literally happened. We're recording this about 8 o'clock in the evening UK time. So the quarterfinal draw happened about half an hour ago after the United game. So the quarterfinal, as it looks right now, is Fulham v Crystal Palace, so all London affair there. Preston got a home tie against Aston Villa. Bournemouth against Manchester City, and then Brighton are hosting either Nottingham Forest or the mighty Ipswich Town. Going through each game there, Richard, Fulham v Crystal Palace. Well, I think, apart from City, this very much does have the sort of taste of, you guys said it on the recent FA Cup episode, I think a lot of these sides are better than what Wigan were when they won it a few years ago. But there's chances for teams here like your Villas, your Fulhams, your Palace, Bournemouth, Brighton, Forest, us maybe. It's FA Cup's kind of been, FA Cup were the first side to win the first division, Preston North End. But, FA Cup's kind of been slightly diminished, I feel, in recent years in terms of its importance. But for these fans here, this is massive, isn't it? If one of these sides, Bar City, can get their hands on this trophy.
Yeah, there's some terrific old kind of names, I think, in English football in there, which is brilliant. Villa haven't won it for a very long time. Preston North End, obviously, as you mentioned, Forest, and ourselves as well, I'd put in that category too. And then you've got some sort of younger, well, not younger, but kind of clubs that have kind of really are having potentially some of the best periods in their history now, with the likes of Bournemouth and Brighton, Palace being in the Premier League for 10 years in a row or whatever. They are having some of the best periods in their histories, and Man City, obviously. So, yeah, it's an interesting draw, actually. It's kind of nice that most of the big clubs are out, to be perfectly honest. It'd be great if City weren't there, but, maybe Bournemouth. I mean, they lost at Bournemouth, didn't they, in the league easily in the league game. So that is a very tough fixture for them. And actually, you would maybe say a 50-50, I think. I mean, Bournemouth have just been brilliant.
I was going to say, I think Bournemouth, really, of all teams for City to play in terms of being home or away, this is probably the tie, and being away as well, it's probably the fixture they wanted to avoid the most, because Bournemouth seem to have City's number at home this season and recent years as well.
Yeah, I agree. So that is a tough one for them. In terms of us, how are you feeling about potentially Brighton away? We obviously drew. Was it 0-0? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Which, if that was the cup, would have gone to extra time. I think Murich's only decent game for us really was at the Amex way earlier in the season. I mean, we played them at home, didn't we, in January? I think it was 2-0. And we were, I think, back and forth for decent parts of the game. But then their quality of their bench, I think Ruter came on and just was an absolute game changer. So the only real telling sign in both their games really was quality. I think we performed relatively well. But it's just a hard game. It's a tough place to go. I mean, I know they're not where they want to be, but Chelsea, big side, they struggle there every year. And City, I think, lost there as well this season. So whoever goes there, it's going to be a tough nut to crack. And they obviously got an away win against St James's Park. So they'll be much happy to be at home this time. But yeah, Brighton. And you look at those sort of clubs like your Brightons, your Bournemouths, Forest. If a qualification for Europe and a FA Cup win, what a season! Like for any of those clubs, isn't it? And City, no offense to them, but it's the only club there you don't want to be there right now because you want one of those different clubs to win. If it's just a City win in the end, it's a bit boring. So hopefully that they can lose to the Cherries in the next round. But
it'd be nice, yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up, Richard?
Were Brighton in the semi-final last year, or have I made that up?
It was Man U versus Cov.
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure who the other one, which they nearly beat, didn't they?
They had a good run one year recently because I think they beat Liverpool.
Right. My
Maybe
knowledge
I don't know. But anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right. For any of those, I mean, for Fulham or Palace, that is a huge game because both of them are easily safe in the Premier League. I mean, Palace have been one of the form teams in 2025. Fulham seem to be pretty consistent the whole time. So for either one of those, that's going to be absolutely massive to get to Wembley, and you'd expect Villa to get past Preston, and then it's going to be tough for us. Obviously, we've got tonight to get through, and then potentially Brighton, which seems tricky. Which is all the more reason that I think we should just, hopefully, we just go for it tonight and have a bit of a go and see what happens. Because it would be lovely to get to a quarter final for the first time in 17. Over 20 years, I think.
Yeah, give or take 20. But yes, hopefully Town can make it to the quarters into that game against Nottingham Forest. That's going to do it for today's show. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you, Richard, for joining me. And hopefully Town can have a fantastic result up in Nottingham tonight. We'll be back tomorrow to give you our take on the game. We'll be giving a little recap episode immediately after kickoff and looking forward to the week as Premier League action returns as well this coming weekend. But again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.